Okay, so the people on the buy side only, could you put your hand up if you employ a lobbyist or a lobby group specifically for the EU regulations? So just the buy side only, please. So that's two. There you go. We were talking about it earlier, and we sort of said, I think, oh, sorry, can I ask the sell side only, how many of the sell side employ a lobbyist directly engaged? So that's a bit more. Generally, there's more people on the sell side that are engaging that. So, sorry, I need to get my notes that were down there. So, I'm sorry to say I've got to stand up here because there's not enough room on the old stage. So today, what we want to talk about is a springboard from Liz's presentation is the synergies between equity and fixed income, if there are any. And what I'd like to do is start by each of the panel. Not you for the moment, because I want to start with Gianluca, to introduce themselves and then just give a little bit of a flavour of the picture that of their journey that they've walked through and currently where they are with their thinking. So Gianluca, if I can turn to you first.
I'll go very quick with the introduction. So Pioneer Investments, I oversee the trading operations there. Well, in terms of skill set, we certainly came from pretty much an equity experience, as Pioneer was mainly managing equity up to a number of years ago. So the percentage was pretty much 30 and 70%. I have to say that over the last 5 years, this ratio has completely been reversed. So we now manage 70% in fixed income and 30% in equity. I think this reflects the dynamic that we're seeing in the market. And in order to respond to this change, we have just moved to a multi-asset model on the trading side, where while earlier we had a very strict specialization on the trading desk between asset classes, and within the asset class between sectors and instruments, we now have created a sort of multi-asset desk. The reason for that is because we feel that there is a room for cross-fertilization of knowledge between the traders, and also, as we will see probably later on, because electronic trading on the fixed income are made, the way we trade more similar between equity and fixed income.
And Chris, from your point of view, I think you came from the equity side. What's been your sort of
Yes,
journey?
I apologize to all the fixed income people in the room. I grew up in equities. So Chris Rice, head of trading at State Street Global Advisors. Grew up in the equity side, and probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we made the decision to organize all of our trading in one central desk. So we took our equity experience, and the thought process around synergies is an interesting one. You say, well, what are the synergies? So let's back away from the market structure and the market discussion within and pull it back into the asset manager. So what are some of the things we did, or we think we do well? Technology. So we have an order management system. We integrate with our execution management systems very well. We've done a lot of work with TCA internally. We have 15 years of equity TCA internally. I think about 30 million analyzed transactions. So we said, okay, we've done that. And we're pretty good at pulling in data. So pulling data into the order management system to give traders better ways to think about where to execute liquidity sources. So we said, okay, that's great. Let's kind of pull in foreign exchange. We did that in 2009, and we pulled in fixed income in 2010. So I think once you pull all of the traders together and you have one technology platform, and think about it, there's a real cost to the buy-side firm. If you have multiple platforms internally, multiple ways to connect to EMSs, if you just simplify the entire structure, it's much more efficient from a cost perspective. But then once you pull all the traders together, multi-assets sitting together, you think, you know what, the world really isn't about asset class differentiation. You have what's liquid across asset classes and instrument types. You think, okay, I can trade that electronically, and you come up with some roadmaps for that. And then you have less liquid, where you pick up the phone and you think about the challenges in the less liquid space. So I think by pulling it all together in that way, that's how we started to think about the challenges. Within the asset manager, again, much more to discuss in market structure. So.
Thank you. Richard, from your background, from a previous life, you were sort of at the forefront of electronic trading on the sell side. It'd be interesting to see what your perspective is now, now that people are starting to look at fixed income. What's your view?
Yeah. Well, I initially started in electronic trading back in the 80s with the exchange, London Stock Exchange, where I was responsible for the post-Big Bang market structure and their first order-driven system. BZW, where we ran a large electronic trading platform to cater for all the retail trading that took place at that time with all the government IPOs. I think the Wharton Business School that back in the mid-80s described the system we were running as a unique example of achieving long-term competitive advantage through the use of technology. That's relevant. It's a point I'd like to come back to later on, because I don't believe long-term competitive advantage through the use of technology is something that can be currently achieved in today's environment. Then set up electronic trading, Credit Suisse, global head of electronic trading, set up algorithmic trading, dark pools, all those nasty things you've heard about on the equities side. And my last full-time role was as CEO of Independant, which is renowned for being innovative in the trading space and for running agency-type models. So a lot of experience on the equity side. I'm not going to claim to be a specialist whatsoever on the fixed income side, although I have built algos for FX and a few other asset classes. I think the title of this section is interesting. It refers to synergies, and I think synergies are supposed to be an example of where, combining a couple of things, the net effect is greater than the sum of the parts. I don't think there's much of that looking at equities and fixed income. I think there's a great deal that people can learn from the equities experience, but in terms of synergies, I think there's possibly small synergies if you're a buy-side participant, because I think the effect on the buy-side is way, way different to the sell side. I think we have to disaggregate this topic a little bit.
Can I come back to that? Because I'd like to talk about the difference between the buy and the sell side. I think they're very different experiences, and I think that's something that's worth sort of teasing out. It's not just a homogenous blob of the industry. I think we need to sort of figure out what the differences are between what the sell side are offering and what the buy side want to do. So, Hubert,
just to conclude, I think the sell side effect is negative. I think there's a negative synergy if the sell side do what they did in equities in the fixed income world. Sorry.
Can you hold that thought? Because I think that's something we should actually look at. So, Hubert, from your experience, I mean, you cover both equities and fixed income for BNP Dealing Services. From your point of view, what synergies do you think there are between equities and fixed income? And I particularly like, I mean, we touched a little bit on technology, but maybe from the people skill set. I just wonder if you could touch on that.
Yeah, definitely my background, Hubert Rotivel, so from BNP Paribas Dealing Services. My background is more equity, but I discovered really when we started to talk with the dealers about this evolution of the market structure, the technology. There was the first effect first effect was against the change. I mean, people are traditionally against the change, but really quickly people were starting to discuss across the equities and the fixed income. So before there was a clear frontier between the two assets, and people were talking about counterparties, but when a dealer from the fixed income side talked with an equity dealer about the counterparties, you didn't know if it's really the same counterparties, because the relationship was clearly different. Now they can talk both with the same persons, with the same people in the brokerage community, to talk about the tool to have access to the flows, so providing by the fixed income firm, but also with the equity, the same bank with the equity, using a tool which can be the same tool as before. So people have really to change their mind. I mean, the way that the fixed income traders access to liquidity was quite simple before. There was the bilateral relationship on the fixed income side using market makers, sometimes using niche broker for flows. You were never have a bank who's coming and said for fixed income, I will do also working an order as an agent. That was not possible. On the equity side, that was the case. You had this bilateral relationship with the banks, and also using flows, IOIs, natural flows, etc. So there was, I think now, the communication between the two desks, for example, are really better, and also because people exchange more on using technology and relationship with the bank.
So one thing that interests me is when you talked about the broker relationship, do you leverage against the full relationship across all asset classes, or do you silo it?
No, more and more the relationship is global. I think the commitment of the capital commitment, especially of the bank, are really seen now as they see the clients, I mean the buy side clients, more globally. So they're really taking account the money that they can make on the equity side, and also the fixed income side, the volume that can.
So, Chris, yeah.
I would agree. I mean, look, you look at the spectrum of the whole relationship. Again, once you compress all asset classes together, what is agency and what is balance sheet intensive? And when you sit down and you look at that spectrum or that S curve or something we saw before, but anyway, you look at it in that sense from a total relationship, that's really the most broad way to have that discussion in the right way from a counterparty perspective. I would agree.
So that leads us nicely sequentially into the liquidity issues around the differences between fixed income and equity, because there are some key differences in liquidity. So Liz, from your point of view, I mean, is that something that we should be thinking a lot about, those key differences, and how the lessons we should learn from equity and translate them into fixed income? Is that a key driver, the liquidity?
Yeah, I mean, what I've found in looking into this is that electronic trading does not create liquidity. So, I mean, that's just like equitization of fixed income markets. It's not the equitization of fixed income markets, it's the market structure standardization, and then equally, electronic trading in fixed income markets is not creating liquidity. So I think those two key points are to take home. However, as far as lessons learned from the equity space, it is technology driven. It's to use what was in the equity space logically in the fixed income space. So I would say the biggest areas are certainly sourcing liquidity globally now, because bonds do not trade in the same way. They're not high frequency. They don't trade often. So it's more like going and looking everywhere for this. So that's what I would say the biggest is in the pre-trade space.
And this is a slightly inflammatory question. I deliberately am phrasing it this way. And it's anyone who wants to pick it up, or you can pass. How well do you think the regulator is recognising these clear differences between fixed income and equity?
They're not. I mean, that's just, yeah. What the regulator is trying to do, and this part I don't think is bad, they're trying to keep the market open for business no matter what the market conditions. And this is based on the market crisis. So it's very much politically driven. However, they went, okay, how do we do this? Let's just look at the equities market, because quite frankly, that's all we know about. So we're going to take that and use that as a template in the fixed income space, and that's where it goes wrong. So we're going to have to go through a struggle to figure this out. And again, I'm really hoping that the regulatory technical standards that will be coming out will be majorly different than what's written in MiFID II.
So if the regulator is looking at the equity market and is holding that up as a good model, isn't there a little element of be careful of what you wish for? Because, I mean, in the equity world, there's fragmentation, there's a lack of transparency. Gianluca, is that something that you adhere to, that sort of thought process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to, I think the fact that policymakers do not understand, technical issues is perfectly reasonable. It's the less reasonable the fact they do not listen, to the people that they have invited, during the negotiation process. So I think equity have brought a lot of positive things. So the equity evolution, the cost of the lower cost of trading, more liquidity, the automation, they're all positive things that the equity evolution has brought. But as you said, equity have also brought a number of negative things. So the fragmentation and all the fragmentation, also the decrease in the lower in the average size of the order, which I remind has also lowered the threshold at which the market is impacted. Now, these are things that we do not want to bring to the fixed income market. So in a sense, as you said, the equity market for us is not a good benchmark, and that's why we do not understand why the regulators would just to take this suit and give it to the fixed income guys.
So what are the
That's the only one
things
they
that
know.
you would pick up from the equity model, if you like? What are the things that you would pick up and say, oh, yeah, that's a good piece, whether it's a skill set, whether it's technology? What are the things that you would pick up?
Yeah, certainly automation is something that we would like to pick up.
Yeah.
I mean, order book in the fixed income space can be very valuable, but only on a limited subset of the fixed income market. So on those parts of the fixed income market that are liquid and can have a two-way pricing. Yeah. But that doesn't work on the most liquid part of the market, where basically the problem, as Lisa said, is not having a price on the screen. A price on the screen doesn't mean that you have liquidity on a bond. So it's on a more illiquid side of the market. What we're looking for is an automation, but the automation needs to be aimed at aggregating a sort of interest, aggregating IOI, aggregating the interest of counterparty to make prices. So on the most liquid part, automation means an equity-styled, order book-driven. On the most liquid part, it means a more efficient dissemination of the information. As I said yesterday, most bonds are liquid because there is dislocation of information, not because they are truly illiquid.
Okay. Richard, I'd like to go back to your point about the difference between the buy side and the sell side and the issue. Sorry, Chris, did you want to make a point?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Just
That was out the corner of my eye. I didn't know if that was a...
No.
Okay.
Just a scratch.
So, Richard, I'm really interested in that difference between the buy and the sell side experiences and the outcomes. Could you just sort of give us a bit more colour around that?
Sure. I mean, I might get sort of elbowed from both sides here, but I would suggest that if you're looking at, say, a multi-asset trading desk, creating a multi-asset world, then that's very much easier to do on the buy side than it is on the sell side. Actually assimilating some of the technology you use for straight-through processing, data capture, etc., on your desks for a series of different asset classes is so much easier than for the majority of sell-side firms. But I think the big difference, and what a lot of people, I think, don't recognize happened in the equity space, is that you started in a world where the regulators wanted to really affect exchanges. Exchanges were seen as a problem. Exchanges were seen as monopolies, and people wanted to change, bust up those monopolies 20 years ago. And it happened in the US, happened in Europe. The sell side maintained a position where they were generating a good ROE. And even where they set up agency models, that coincided with the growth of a new type of investor called hedge funds. It coincided with leverage that boosted trading enormously. They were still using balance sheet, in other words, even though they'd set up these agency models. But there was a race, there was a mindset, a race to capture market share, and market share comes at a cost. And that meant, as we know, if you look at equities, almost cost-plus type pricing. So you're looking at a sell side where it's not just me saying this. I think Barclays produced a report last month. McKinsey produced a report last year. It's almost game over for the large Wall Street firms. The top 15 firms have got an ROE of less than 10%. Their ROE doesn't cover the cost of capital. It's heading towards 4 or 6% over the next few years. They need to slice off a third of their cost base from where they are today, or find billions in extra revenues. It just isn't happening. So equities is not washing its face for most of these firms. I think there are about 2 firms in Europe that are profitable in the equity space. Fixed income, if they switch to an agency model, is going the same way. And they're simply not going to achieve the return on equity that they require. My point I made to Gianluca earlier is they can't play this game. It's back to what I said. It's not a case of establishing long-term competitive advantage through building technology. The world is different. You've got to innovate every week. You've got to innovate every month. These firms are too big. Their culture doesn't map onto that.
Okay, so a nice message for the sell side. So what I'm interested...
What does it mean for the buy side?
Well, I was going to say the ramifications for the buy side. I'm very interested to understand
I think
that.
the buy side have got to move a lot faster than they did in equities to become more self-sufficient, which they are doing. You can see that happening on the fixed income side. There have to be more all-to-all models. There will be, and I've got to say, we've heard a lot already about what I call the elephant trade problem. Yeah, the large trade, be it in a government bond or be it in a liquid security. Don't waste time trying to find a solution for the elephant trade. There is no silver bullet. You won't find one. What you'll find is a feedback loop into portfolio construction. You're not going to buy these things. Yeah? You might hold them in fixed income for the full duration, but you're not going to buy them, you're not going to trade them. It's going to become harder.
So if I understand you correctly, what the ramifications are is at the portfolio manager level, they'll realise that they can't actually buy or sell these large blocks. And so, sorry, I just want to bring in Hubert. Do you see that? Do you recognise that from your experience?
That's a great opportunity for us. I mean, for the trading desk, because before the PMs was really concentrated on the portfolio manager. Sometimes they're working. They ask us to go this counterparty or not. Now they are a bit lost about the market structure. So it's now a very good recognition of our job, because we talk now with the different actors, banks, but also markets, also different. Our job is really to sourcing liquidity where they are. And honestly, the PMs now, they are completely lost about that. So that's why we invest. And it's not. It's part of our job to have this kind of pre-trade conversation with them about the way, not necessarily on which instruments, but really, for example, for ETF, what is the spread between this kind of
so part of that discussion is, excuse me, part of that discussion is a pre-trade about how can you affect that execution and the cost of affecting that execution, and is it worth it? And is that something you recognise, Chris? Do you have those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, you want to map all of the inventory that you can see. So in other words, that flashlight that you put out in the market across asset classes. I mean, at the end of the day, portfolio construction and knowing you can get what you want to get is key. So how do you partner with various vendors, technology firms, broker-dealers to pull that information back in? And we're doing a lot of that right now. I think we're sort of at step one. I think there's a next step to come. But it's a key thing. One thing I wanted to go back to in terms of regulation, if I can digress for one second. So, we introduced more competition to the exchanges. So you think about, okay, you've got the exchange model that's kind of come out. We've seen spreads collapse in equities. Again, I'm kind of moving across that. But one thing that happened was we saw a new liquidity entrant. Now, we could do 2 hours or maybe 10 years of panels on high-frequency trading. But when that happened in equities, a new liquidity entrant came in. We can debate whether it was good or bad, or whether parts of it are good and parts of it are bad. So I think one of the things I'd like to get to today, too, is to say, okay, so if we think about market structure and the way this is all going to come together, is there a way we can think about it where we could bring some new liquidity entrant into this landscape and into this picture? And I'm not saying that was intended in the equity space, and it's happened, and there are debate points there, but what's the corollary in fixed income? I think that's
absolutely key, because that was the dynamic in equities. You got different guys with different alpha horizons. Hedge funds move faster than traditional long funds. High-frequency traders move faster than hedge funds. So you had these different alpha horizons that help make a bigger pie.
Is that the spectrum between investors and speculators? I think you were saying that earlier.
I said earlier, I think the regulators, once they hear the word speculator, pull the shutters down. They just don't like speculating. In fact, I'm not sure they like trading that much. So, but speculation for the last 150 years has been the naughty boy. I mean, it's not defined. No one knows what a speculator is. I think there are 3 on the panel, by the way. But regulators certainly don't know what speculators are.
They're not
smiling. I think one of the controversial point that I'd like to throw in for the buy side to mull over throughout the day, though, is that the all-to-all model sounds great. In my sort of experience over 30 years, quite often you find that the buy side don't actually like to trade with the buy side. directly.
Ooh, come on, Richard. That's just not
Love that.
collegial.
Well, okay, let's
Come on, guys.
Well, hang on. So let's look at that. So if we go back far enough, there was eCrossNet, and eCrossNet was a buy-side to buy-side equity crossing platform.
That was on my list.
I did see it on there. I was sort of
yeah.
involved in that when I was at Phillips and Drew many years ago.
It didn't survive.
Didn't survive, and to this day I still don't know why. So there was a little bit of booing going on about this also. So from the buy side, why do you think that Richard has that view that buy-side to buy-side trading, they don't really like it?
Well, I think it's interesting. You have a landscape of technology vendors and folks who come in and offer you mousetraps. Here are different ways to trade. And so you saw all of the names of different firms. And by the way, I love that competition. Let's get 40, 50 firms into it, and the best model survives. But you got to remember, every mousetrap is built on the premise of an economic model. Someone has to come in and make money to provide that service. So I think sometimes the profit motive and economic model can get in the way of the way that the buy side would really like to ideally interact. And that's a bit of a leading statement, but I think that comes into some of it. In terms of you say, well, why things worked or didn't work, I think the buy side does like to trade with each other, but I think that right fit maybe hasn't been there because of the way that some of these offerings have been put into us. Oh, you just walked off.
No. I wanted to get this, actually, because I think there's something in here that it says, it's somewhere in here that 68% of the buy side said they'll be wanting to do more buy-side to buy-side trading.
But I'll tell you this much, all-to-all in fixed income, when I first came into the space in 2009-10, I said, great, we're going to start crossing everything. And then you learned about 80,000 CUSIPs and the issuer fragmentation and everything else. So is that really the solution to focus on? I actually found that was actually more tactical versus strategic, and that brings us back to the inventory stuff.
There are technical aspects. I think there's also the behavioral finance aspect. There's also the herd mentality of fund managers in general that can tend to happen. The behavioral aspect, I think, is really important because there are solutions out there now, and I can't figure out why they're not the #1 liquidity pool in the world. I can't figure out why they're not bigger than they are, and it can only come down to a reluctance on the buy side to trade. But you've also got the behavioral finance thing, because I can remember way back before eCrossNet, when commissions were fixed at 2%, and someone gave the buy side screens to trade on. You know, a buyer comes up of ICI at the time, and all the sellers disappear, and there's 6 buyers of ICI. There's a genuine reluctance. You as a trader might understand this, but if you go back to your PM and say, that block you wanted to shift, I've found someone, how many times do they suddenly start thinking, what do they know that I don't know?
So Hubert, sorry, you want to make a point?
It's not something new. Sorry.
No, go on, Hubert.
No, I think it's not something new. We've got access to a liquidity pool where we can decide to interact with the buy side only or the buy side plus the sell side, right, which is not really new for me. I mean, traditionally and simplest view could be to say the buy side are always in the same side, which is not necessarily true because we had in our different asset management company different strategy, and you don't trade the same with an alternative strategy asset manager than the long.
But isn't that the point that Richard was making about in equities there are different strategies?
But it can be also on fixed income.
In fixed income, I just wonder, is there less of that goes on? Mm-hmm. I think you're right. There are different strategies, but in fixed income, I think it's less the case, or it's more the case that there is more directional trading that goes on. I'm not saying it's it's binary.
Yeah, but I think the interesting thing is that maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we never imagined to discuss with the market. Yeah. The market was only, the discussion was between the broker and the bank who's got access to market, but never you can imagine to have this. And they provide now also, there's a big competition. I mean, the new commerce is the market because they propose also us to have this kind of liquidity, organize it, that where we can exchange our liquidity and find a way. One element, and already finished after that, is that if we want to trade between buy side and buy side, there's reporting obligation, and that's really a big job. I think the regulator is really attentive of that, that's really a big job to organize the market, to disclose the liquidity on the post-trade, and to print and give you more obligation.
So I found in here, it's in this question, how do you intend to overcome the increasing difficulties with the liquidity and credit markets? 48% they are going to undertake buy-side to buy-side trading. And I was asked to make a comment about it, and I said, it is interesting to see that the buy-side want to undertake more trading with each other. I mean, my sort of translate that into, I can understand why they want to do, the buy-side want to do that, and as a buy-side person, I did want to do that as well. But the actual mechanics of it are incredibly difficult, and I think, Hubert, it's a good point. Now, we've got a few minutes left, so do we have any questions from the floor? Oh, we do. There's one here.
Hi. Is this working?
Yeah.
Hi, Charles Teschner, Boston Consulting Group. We haven't spoken much about primary markets. I mean, isn't a key reason for the big asset managers represented here to trade through the traditional sell side to preserve access to primary issues?
Does anyone want to pick that up?
Okay, Gianluca?
Well, go on, Gianluca, have a go.
Yes, it's. I mean, primary market is one of our main source of alpha. And I have to say, it's also one area of the markets that haven't changed really. So it's both from a process perspective. We all know that the market remains very manual and with all the inefficiencies that it brings, but also still need the support of the syndicate and that to help.
Can what's behind your question? I understand. At the top level what you're asking, but is there something beneath what you're trying to get to?
That we still need banks, probably to get access to the market.
No, I just wondered from your point of view.
I guess what I'm saying is I believe there's an inherent reason to preserve the status quo on the part of the buy-side firms as long as they're reliant on the sell side for access to the primary issues that they want.
Okay.
But that will end.
But
if you put, in other words, I guess what I'm saying is if you push through regulatory reform on primary and secondary markets at the same time.
But if you think, for example, the
Dutch auction model, for example, in the issuance of fixed
So there's a clear linkage between what you're saying is the primary issuance and the alpha generation of that to what's going on in the secondary market, and what the changes that could happen here are going to be absolutely tied to what goes there.
But that's broken already, isn't it? That
Yeah.
virtuous circle has gone already because you can't employ balance sheet in the way that you used to absorb those issues back when
Sorry, Liz, you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, BlackRock did a very good article on this, on the primary markets and possibly changing them. The interesting thing about that is you could have modifying the actual bonds, the issues that are out there, and then going in and modifying those, having maturity dates that are the same. In other words, not 900 different bonds, and instead have some sort of structure. And again, I'm not sure if BlackRock is in the audience, but if you had the structure, then you'd have potentially more electronic trading in corporate bonds, and that's the key to corporate bonds.
This is the report, and it's on the internet. You can grab it, or if you grab hold of me, I can send you a copy. And I agree with you.
Yeah,
there's a very good bit here,
very good
and
article.
it talks about product standardisation, which comes back to your point, because that standardises and that will change the model.
Yeah.
So
can I also mention that maybe this is something that hasn't been mentioned over these couple of days, that also the way the corporate access works is being changed. I mean, the corporate access has been a monopoly of banks for forever, and now this is changing, and we are seeing a number of platforms that are emerging that actually whose objective is really to bring the client and the issuer together without the intermediation of the bank. This is, this is probably just the beginning, but it will change as well. So I see less intermediation also on the primary market.
Okay, one question. Make it an easy one and quick one. Oh, go on.
David,
just in addition to the debate, just for everybody's education, there are actually initiatives underway for electronification in fixed income primary. There are things going on, so people just need to find out about them. Secondly, I draw people's attention to the Bank of England Fair and Effective Markets Review, which came out 10 days ago. It's taken BlackRock's comment and put them in official, and I'm calling it MiFID 3, because it's sort of saying, is there any regulations that we haven't thought of, guys, that you still now need? Bank of England, HM Treasury, and the FCA in the UK. It came out on 27th of October. It's got corporate bond standardization, new issue primary allocations, auction processes. It's all there. It's actually now taken it to another level. So
that's very interesting. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
And Oliver, that's a nice little another conference, MiFID 3. Yeah. Brilliant. Well
there
done. Okay. Are there any more questions? There are. Oh, sorry, there is. There's just one here. Last question, if I may.
Yeah, I had an observation to make. I was quite surprised by the remark made by Elizabeth regarding the fact that electronic trading did not bring liquidity to the fixed income space. I remember, as a former investment banker and fixed income trader, 15 years ago, to trade any clip size on bonds electronically, it was a sweet dream. Now you can do it. Even more on the listed derivative side. I mean, the shift from the largest fixed income futures exchange, CME, from floor trading to electronic trading.
Do you want me to take this, or do you want to take this?
Has brought liquidity to a factor of 10.
Okay.
It was impossible 10 years ago to trade any CME futures in the European morning. Now you have liquidity as you wish.
Liz?
Well, what you're also talking about is efficiency, automation, and certainly in the pre-trade space in sourcing liquidity. So you're finding liquidity. What I'm saying is that electronic trading is not necessarily creating liquidity, like in the equity space with the high-frequency trading. Yeah. That's where I'm saying it's different. Absolutely, it has created opportunities to trade, but it's not necessarily bringing new forms of liquidity into the market space. And that's what I'm talking about. But if you wanted to add.
No, that's exactly the point I want to bring up about it. It brought in other types of investors, which I think was where you were going, the high-frequency traders. Yeah. And I think it's a good point because, liquidity is, I think, at the heart of what we were talking about, some synergies. I'm not quite sure we've answered the question around here are loads of synergies. I think what we've teased out is that equity and fixed income are very, very different. Fixed income isn't a single asset class. It is a number of different instruments that are bracketed under the title of fixed income. So I think we've got a lot to sort of think about. Can I thank the panel? Liz, Gianluca, Chris, Richard, and Hubert. Big hand for them, please.